There was once a man, a former slave, who had every reason to be consumed by bitterness and pain, yet he lived with a peace and freedom that most of us only dream of. His name was Epictetus, and his teachings hold the key to overcoming one of the most crushing experiences we all face: heartbreak. Imagine applying the same wisdom that helped him rise above his chains to your own life, to let go of the emotional weight you've been carrying. In this story, you'll follow the journey of someone just like you, who thought they'd never heal after a breakup, until they stumbled upon Epictetus's life-changing philosophy. What they discovered transformed not just how they viewed the breakup, but how they viewed their entire life. And now it's time for you to learn that same lesson. Stay with me, because this story might just change how you deal with heartbreak forever. Alex sat motionless on the bed, phone in hand, staring at the message that seemed to shatter their entire world. "I don't think this is working anymore. I need some space." The words felt cold, final, and completely unexpected. How had it come to this? Just days ago, everything seemed fine. Or at least that's what Alex thought. But now it felt like the ground beneath them had been ripped away, leaving nothing but an endless, aching emptiness. For hours, Alex just sat there, reading and rereading the message, as if the meaning would change with each glance. It didn't. Every word hit like a dagger. There was no explanation, no closure, just the abrupt end of something that had been so much more than a relationship. It was a future they had both imagined, filled with plans, hopes, and shared dreams. Now, all of it was slipping through Alex's fingers like sand, impossible to grasp. In the days that followed, Alex tried to move forward, but everything around them screamed of the past. The coffee cup they used to share still sat on the kitchen counter. The playlist they had made together played in the background. The songs that once brought joy now felt like cruel reminders of what was lost. Even the faint smell of their ex's perfume on the sweater left behind brought a sharp, painful tug in Alex's chest. It was as though the entire apartment had become a museum of memories, each item a relic of a time that no longer existed. The worst part wasn't just the pain of loss, it was the endless cycle of questions. What went wrong? Alex replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment in their mind, trying to pinpoint when things began to fall apart. Was it something they said? Something they didn't say? Could they have done something differently? The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers but instead deepening the pit of self-doubt and regret that had begun to swallow Alex whole. Their friends offered support in the only way they knew how, with clichés. "You're better off," one friend had said, trying to sound comforting. It just wasn't meant to be. But these well-intentioned words bounced off Alex like rubber bullets. How could anyone understand what they were going through? It wasn't just a breakup. It was the loss of a life they had envisioned. Every piece of advice felt hollow, as though the people around them were looking at a distant problem, while Alex stood in the eye of the storm, drowning. As days blurred into nights, Alex found solace in distraction. They threw themselves into work, taking on extra projects to keep busy, filling their days with tasks to avoid the quiet moments. But no matter how much they tried to occupy their mind, the pain found its way back. The nights were the hardest. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence was deafening. No amount of Netflix, music, or late-night scrolling through social media could drown out the feelings of loneliness that engulfed them. There were moments when Alex wondered if the pain would ever end. How do people get over this, they thought, feeling as though the heartbreak was now a permanent part of who they were. It was as if their entire identity had become tied to this relationship, and now that it was gone, they didn't know who they were anymore. The person they had been before the relationship felt distant, like a ghost of a life that no longer fit. They weren't the same, and they feared they never would be again. Then one evening, as Alex aimlessly scrolled through their phone, something caught their eye. A podcast titled, "How Stoicism Can Help You Let Go." Stoicism, it was a word Alex had heard before, but they didn't know much about it. Maybe it was just another self-help philosophy, but something about the title drew them in. The idea of letting go felt impossible right now, but it was exactly what they needed. Without thinking, they hit play. The voice on the podcast began speaking calmly, introducing the ancient philosophy of Stoicism and the teachings of a man named Epictetus. He wasn't a king or a nobleman, but a slave, someone who had faced unimaginable hardship, yet lived with profound inner peace. The idea was simple but profound. We don't control the events that happen to us, only how we respond to them. As the podcast continued, Alex felt something shift within them. Could it be true? Could the pain they were feeling be a result of trying to control the uncontrollable? The thought lingered in their mind long after the podcast ended. For the first time since the breakup, there was a glimmer of hope. Maybe there was a way to get through this after all, not by changing what had happened, but by changing how they thought about it. The next morning, Alex woke up with a heavy heart, but something from the previous night had shifted. Epictetus, the man they had learned about in the podcast, stayed in their thoughts. How had someone who lived as a slave, with no control over his own life, managed to find peace in the chaos? How could someone with everything stacked against him master the art of letting go? Alex needed to understand more. Curiosity drove them to search for more on this ancient philosopher. They found themselves reading Epictetus's core teachings, words that had been passed down for centuries but felt eerily relevant to their own heartbreak. One idea stood out. Some things are in our control and some things are not. It was a simple statement, but Alex felt it resonate deeply. They had spent weeks trying to control things that weren't within their power, their ex's feelings, the outcome of the relationship, the past itself. All of that was beyond them, but they had been trying to bend it to their will. The more Alex read, the more it made sense. Epictetus believed that the source of human suffering wasn't what happened to us, but our judgments about those events. We cause our own pain by trying to control the uncontrollable. The breakup had happened. There was nothing Alex could do to change that. But they were still holding on, still trying to rewrite the past in their mind, as if clinging to the memories would somehow fix everything. It wouldn't. The relationship was over, and that was a fact. But how they responded to that fact, that was still within their control. Epictetus had lived through far worse. As a slave, he had no control over his external circumstances, what he ate, where he lived, even whether he lived or died. And yet, he found freedom in his mind. He had realized that true freedom wasn't about controlling your environment, it was about mastering your thoughts. No one could take that power away from him, no matter how harsh his external reality was. This realization hit Alex hard. All this time they had been trying to control their ex's decision, hoping to change how things ended. But that was a battle they were always destined to lose because it wasn't theirs to fight. What was in their control was how they chose to move forward. For the first time since the breakup, Alex felt a flicker of empowerment. They couldn't undo the heartbreak, but they could decide how to respond to it. As Alex continued to dive deeper into Epictetus' teachings, they began to see their situation with new eyes. The pain was still there, but now there was a path forward. They weren't trapped by their circumstances. No, the only trap was their mind, and Epictetus had just handed them the key to escape. He had survived as a slave, later becoming a great philosopher, respected by people who had never endured even a fraction of what he had. He had chosen his response to the cruelty and hardship, and by doing so, he had become free. Could Alex do the same? There was a specific teaching that stood out. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Alex mulled over this idea for days. The breakup wasn't the problem. It was how they had been clinging to it that caused the most pain. It wasn't the event itself that was destructive. It was the way they had been interpreting it. Could this really be the key to healing? Determined to find out, Alex made a decision. Instead of focusing on their ex, on what had been lost, they would focus on what they still had control over: their thoughts, their reactions, their future. They would stop trying to control what was out of their reach and start focusing on their own healing. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time, Alex felt like there was a way out of the dark pit they had been trapped in. The teachings of Epictetus had given Alex something they hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Not the false hope of fixing the relationship, but the hope of finding peace within themselves. They couldn't change the past, but they could change how they moved forward. And that, Alex realized, was where their true power lay. With Epictetus's teachings now firmly rooted in their mind, Alex decided it was time to take action. This wouldn't be easy, and they knew it. Letting go wasn't just a switch they could flip. It was going to be a process, a gradual transformation that required patience and persistence. The first step was acceptance, but Alex quickly realized how difficult this actually was. Every instinct inside them screamed to fight back against the heartbreak, to reach out to their ex, to try and fix what was broken. But they remembered what they had learned from Epictetus. Some things are in our control and others are not. Their ex's feelings, the outcome of the breakup, these were all outside of Alex's control. But what they could control was their response. They could choose to keep holding on to the past, or they could start letting go. Each morning, Alex began a new routine. Before diving into the chaos of the day, they would sit quietly and reflect. They wrote in a journal, not about the pain or the loss, but about what they could control that day, whether it was their thoughts, their actions, or their focus on self-growth. This practice, small as it was, became a lifeline. It helped Alex shift their attention away from what they couldn't change and toward what they could actively work on. But there were still moments where Alex felt the pull of the past. Some days were harder than others. A certain song would play on the radio, and it would bring back memories that felt almost too painful to bear. The temptation to reach out, to rekindle the connection with their ex, would grow stronger during those times. But instead of acting on those impulses, Alex paused. They reminded themselves of one of Epictetus's teachings. We suffer not from events themselves, but from our judgment about them. It wasn't the breakup itself causing this suffering. It was Alex's refusal to let go of the emotional attachment. They realized that the longer they tried to hold on, the more they prolonged their own pain. With that understanding, Alex started to see their emotions differently. When sadness or longing surfaced, they didn't fight it or try to numb it with distractions. Instead, they acknowledged the feelings, allowing them to rise and pass, knowing that emotions, like waves, were temporary. One day, Alex faced a real test of their newfound stoicism. After weeks of no contact, their ex sent a casual message. Just a few words. "Hey, how have you been?" But it stirred up a whirlwind of emotions. The old Alex would have immediately responded, eager for any chance to reconnect, to revive the relationship. But this time, something was different. Alex paused, rereading the message, and realized that they didn't need to respond. They didn't need this conversation to find closure. The closure they were seeking wasn't something their ex could give them. It was something Alex had to find within themselves. With a deep breath, Alex deleted the message. It wasn't out of anger or spite, but out of a sense of self-respect. They weren't the same person who had been consumed by heartbreak weeks ago. They were healing, and they knew that responding to this message would only reopen old wounds. This was a small victory, but a significant one. It marked a turning point in Alex's journey, the moment they realized that they didn't need someone else's validation to feel whole. The days turned into weeks, and slowly, Alex began to rebuild. They started reconnecting with parts of themselves that had been lost during the relationship. Painting, a hobby they had once loved, found its way back into their life. They took up new challenges like hiking and cooking, rediscovering the simple joys that had nothing to do with their ex. With each small victory, Alex felt their sense of self-worth growing stronger. Journaling had become a sacred practice, a way to track progress and stay grounded. Alex wrote about the little things that brought them peace, the moments of clarity they experienced, and the setbacks that sometimes surfaced. It was a reminder that healing wasn't a straight line. It was a process, one that required patience and compassion for themselves. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Alex realized something that stopped them in their tracks. For the first time in weeks, they had gone an entire day without thinking about their ex. The ache in their chest, once so constant, had faded. The thoughts that used to consume them had quieted. It was in that moment that Alex understood just how far they had come. They weren't fully healed yet, but they were getting there. And the most powerful part? Alex had done it by focusing on what they could control, their own thoughts, actions, and mindset. They hadn't needed their ex to find peace. They had found it within themselves. This was the beginning of a new chapter. Alex had learned that heartbreak, like any other obstacle in life, could be overcome not by changing the external circumstances, but by mastering the internal. Epictetus had taught them that true power came from within, and now Alex was living proof of that wisdom. As time went on, Alex realized that the process of letting go wasn't a single moment of revelation. It was a journey made up of countless small decisions, each day choosing to release the past, piece by piece, and embracing the present moment instead. Every time Alex chose not to dwell on their ex, not to replay old conversations in their mind, it felt like another step forward. One of the biggest breakthroughs came when Alex recognized the difference between letting go of the relationship and letting go of the pain. In the early days, they had believed the two were intertwined, that if they moved on from their ex, they would lose the meaning and the lessons of the relationship. But the truth was, letting go of the pain didn't mean forgetting or erasing the past. It meant accepting it as part of their story, without allowing it to define their future. Alex began to shift their mindset from one of loss to one of growth. The breakup, as painful as it had been, had taught them invaluable lessons about themselves. They had discovered their own resilience, their ability to survive heartache, and, more importantly, their capacity for self-compassion. In moments of solitude, Alex reflected on how much they had changed, not just as a result of the breakup, but because of how they had chosen to respond to it. This wasn't just about surviving heartbreak anymore, it was about thriving in its aftermath. One morning, as Alex sat by the window, sipping coffee and journaling as the sun rose, they realized something profound. The pain that had once seemed so overwhelming had gradually transformed into something softer, something more like understanding. They no longer felt the sharp sting of loss when thinking about their ex. Instead, there was acceptance, an acknowledgement that the relationship had been important, but it was no longer the central part of their life. Epictetus's teachings continued to guide Alex during this process. One of his ideas stood out. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do, and you will go on well. For weeks, Alex had resisted what had happened, wishing things were different, trying to rewrite the past in their mind. But now they understood that true freedom came from accepting reality as it was, not as they wished it to be. This shift in thinking brought with it a sense of peace that Alex hadn't experienced before. The breakup was no longer something to fight against, something to heal from. It was a natural part of life, an experience that had shaped them into who they were becoming. By embracing what had happened, rather than wishing it away, Alex found themselves moving forward in a way they hadn't expected. The need to control the narrative, to cling to what had been lost, began to dissolve. They started focusing more on the future. What could they build from here? What new paths could they explore? The breakup had created space for growth, and Alex was determined to use that space wisely. They set new goals for themselves, goals that had nothing to do with relationships or the past, but everything to do with becoming the best version of themselves. Whether it was picking up new skills, strengthening friendships, or simply enjoying their own company, Alex began to embrace life with a sense of freedom that had been missing for so long. Each day, Alex woke up feeling a little lighter. The memories that had once weighed so heavily on them now felt like gentle reminders of a past that had shaped them, but no longer controlled them. They had reclaimed their life, one day at a time, by letting go of what they couldn't change and focusing on what they could. And with that came the realization that the true power of letting go wasn't just about leaving the past behind. It was about creating space for something new. The process of letting go had transformed Alex in ways they couldn't have imagined. They had learned that peace wasn't something that came from external circumstances. It was something that was cultivated within, and as they embraced that truth, they felt freer than they had in a long time. One quiet evening, Alex sat in the park, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As the cool breeze brushed against their face, they realized something that took them by surprise. They were at peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from ignoring the pain or pushing away the memories. It was the kind of peace that came from acceptance, from truly understanding that everything they had been through had led them to this moment. For the first time in a long while, Alex wasn't consumed by thoughts of their ex or the breakup. The relationship that once dominated their every thought now felt like a distant chapter in their story, one that had been important but was no longer the defining feature of their life. It was a chapter that had taught them more about themselves than they could have imagined, but now it was time to turn the page. Epictetus's teachings had guided Alex through the darkest parts of the journey. The realization that they couldn't control everything, that the only true power lay in their response to events, had transformed them. They had moved from being a victim of heartbreak to becoming the author of their own story. The pain that had once felt like a heavy burden was now a source of strength, a reminder of their resilience and ability to grow through even the most challenging times. As Alex sat on that park bench, they felt a quiet confidence settling within them. They were no longer the person who had been shattered by the breakup. They were someone stronger, wiser, and more in tune with who they truly were. The relationship, the heartbreak, it had been part of their journey, but it didn't define them anymore. They had reclaimed their life, not by changing the external circumstances, but by mastering their internal world. With a smile, Alex stood up and began walking home. The future no longer felt uncertain or intimidating. It felt wide open, filled with possibilities. They didn't know exactly what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty felt exciting rather than frightening. They had learned that they didn't need control over every aspect of life to find peace. They just needed to control how they chose to move forward. And in that moment, Alex understood the most important lesson of all. True freedom doesn't come from avoiding pain or hardship. It comes from embracing life as it is, finding strength in the face of adversity, and realizing that no matter what happens, you always have the power to choose your response. The heartbreak hadn't broken them, it had built them. Alex's journey is a reminder for all of us. Heartbreak, pain, and loss are inevitable parts of life, but how we respond to them is what truly defines our growth. The teachings of Epictetus and Stoicism show us that the key to inner peace doesn't lie in controlling everything around us. It lies in mastering our reactions, accepting what we cannot change, and embracing life as it comes. We all have the power to let go of what's weighing us down. We can turn our pain into a path towards self-discovery, resilience, and strength. Just like Alex, we can move from being a victim of circumstance to the author of our own story. Remember, it's not what happens to us that matters, it's how we choose to respond. So, the next time life throws challenges your way, ask yourself, what can I control? And when you find the answer, embrace it fully. You might just discover that your greatest strength lies within, waiting to be unleashed.